Grab a cup of joe, buckle up, and let's embark on a journey of self-discovery, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Let's get rolling.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Rhythm of the Road podcast, and I am joined by my amazing co-host, Nell, and our series, the Mixed Media Series, where we talk about anything that's creative, and legitimately, we decide 5 minutes or 5 seconds, one of the two, right before we hit the red button. And for those of you who don't know what the red button is, that's the record button, in case you don't look at buttons anymore. That's the way it used to be on the old VCRs. When you would hit the record, that's the only way you might know. So
VCR, my God.
And in the studio, we always call it the red button because it's the red light to shut your mouth and be ready and be prepared. So here we are. Oh, if you're watching on video, make sure that you see the little red light that came on Nell's black shirt, because it was perfectly placed and timed to make sure that you know exactly when we are going live here. So I think that is like this perfect segue into what we were going to talk about today. And that's just like, how far are you willing to go with your content? And most specifically around this idea, not even an idea, but like an owning of your authenticity. And I know for me, last year, and by last year, I mean 2024, my word for the year was authentically me. And so I think this is just like, it's kind of a beautiful wrap up or thought process after having a year of kind of living that out. And of course, we're talking about content specifically, but I think with a broad owning of a word, in my case, I said it was a phrase, but it was one word. I hyphenated them. So then it's one word, right? Is all you publishers out there, and sorry, but I'm not writing it out. I'm speaking it out. So we can't edit that.
Right. No. And, that's authentically you. So there you go.
So we're living it out in real time right here as we record this episode.
That's right. Well, I guess, the topic was meant to be for today, because this little red light on my shirt does represent that we're live aspect, but it's also Valentine's Day, and this is the only thing I own with any red in it. So I was trying to be festive. So, yeah.
I'm not participating in Valentine's Day. In fact,
this is about as much participation as I give. So, I have a lot of meetings today. So I thought, you know what? Let's give the festive vibe.
That is very festive. You might want to call that out as you're having these meetings so that people can identify that as being festive.
Yeah, well, it's so kind of jumping right into it here. So there's a trend lately. I don't know if you've experienced this, but there was a trend briefly where people would turn the camera on themselves for social media while they're crying or experiencing some sort of emotion. And people, heading into the comments and saying, oh, this is so selfish. Why would you do this? And that to me is the epitome of how far are you willing to take your content. So that's just something recent that I can think of. I mean, let alone the climate, the state of the world and everything that we live in every day. But that's just a particular subject. I don't know. How do we feel about that? Turning the camera on yourself when you are experiencing some sort of emotion.
I like that. And I feel like we've talked about this a bit as a trend before, and just more in a wondering, like I think spoke about it from the why, but now thinking about it from the perspective of just being authentic and how far are you willing to go, to be authentic is to break down fear, and that fear of allowing others. And I guess that parallels right in with vulnerability. So how vulnerable are you willing to be?
Yep.
As a means to how far you're willing to go for that authenticity. And I think it's really interesting because I think you're actually asking a question around like, what's the intent behind that particular idea or thought? And then what's the impact? like I've been living with these two words a lot lately. And
Mhm.
what's the intent and what's the impact, right? I can intend to do something, like I can say I'm well intentioned,
Mhm.
like it was great and I intended it to feel or have this experience, but the impact was nowhere near that.
Right.
And it can go both ways. And so I wonder in if this idea of how far are we willing to go for authenticity, are you being intentional
Mhm.
around that, or are you just going for impact?
Right. And even when we're going for intent, what is the actual intent? Is it to help people? Is it to show people that things aren't always the highlight reel that social media portrays to us every day?
Mhm.
What is the actual intent? Because we can be intentional, but have the wrong intentions, for lack of a better term. And what is wrong exactly? I mean, this can go on and on. I think that if you're genuinely a good person, and for just an example, when I decided to leave my job and go with our business full time, Kenny and I were vlogging at the time, and we were pretty much vlogging everything we could at this point. We were coming out of a pandemic and trying to make things work on YouTube. And if you're new to YouTube, that's what you got to do. You got to make it work. You stay consistent. You don't stop uploading just because you think you don't have any content.
Mhm.
Sure, certainly you have to be intentional with that too. But when we actually stood in our kitchen and made that decision, and I was in tears and the whole 9 yards, and we were having that conversation, the camera was sitting on the counter, and I went over and I just turned it on and I filmed our conversation and put it in a vlog on YouTube. And I think I did that because at the time it just felt like, you know what? Somebody else is going through this, and I want them to see that this is a normal, natural reaction and conversation. And I don't want people to feel alone in this. And that can be misconstrued to
Mhm.
other people. It can be seen as narcissistic. It could be seen as ill intended, trying to show people that maybe this is not something that they want to do or something like that. But that's where our intent was. Had I had a different intent with it, like, oh, people just want to see me cry, and oh, I can get views and likes and all the things just for those surface level interactions,
Mhm.
I think there's a difference there too.
Yeah, and I think that because you can identify that intent in either direction, it gives, it empowers you with the choice, right?
Mhm.
I was on a meeting yesterday with some folks who are really just struggling with, what do I create for content and what
Mm.
do I do? And literally, I'm like, you all have a smartphone, right? I also made the comment that I wish sometimes I still had a dumb phone, because
I
then it
miss
wouldn't.
my BlackBerry
Ooh, the
so
BlackBerry with the
much.
trackball.
Oh, yes, it was so good.
Yes. Even the old flip phone that I can't do anything, like you had the old just number to text. Ugh. Yeah, those are the days.
They
Um,
were.
those were the days. And I said, just turn it around and just point it at you and be authentic and share something. And because you're doing it with an intent of being authentic,
Mhm.
because that legitimately, that's what people want to see and experience. That's when we're talking about in, both of our media spaces, when we're talking about content in an external capacity, we're really trying to stop the flick, right? We're
Yeah.
trying to stop folks from just kind of mindlessly scrolling or clicking next on the button or swiping to the next, reel or short or whatever. And it's those moments of authenticity, of showing the real, um, for not to be punny, um, the real person, the real reaction, the real experience, because nobody can fake that.
Mhm.
Um, we were watching a show last night, and there's this kind of potential love scene type of moment,
Mhm.
and um, and Tracy made a comment and said, that actor is so good because, like, you can't fake the emotion that you saw and in the eyes,
Right.
right? You can do all sorts of things with your person, but
Mhm.
like the eyes never lie, so to
Mhm.
speak.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's really true. And
Mhm.
then it was like, oh, well, then how do we be authentic as a whole and not try to also hide something in that message, right? And
Yeah.
I think most of the people that you and I now are associating with and do business with or partner with or collaborate with, like they're authentic people. They're not trying to be fake. The
Right.
intent is to not kind of pull the covers over on someone
Mhm.
and put blinders on them. It's really to be authentic, because we're working with artists and creatives and business owners and entrepreneurs. The whole point is to be authentic, and I even tell all the artists that I'm working with here in the studio, I'm like, the best thing you can do is put your phone on record while we're recording. Show
Yes.
people what that is like. Show people the struggle.
Right.
And
Yeah.
not because everyone struggles, but so that they can go, wow, I got to be part of the process.
Right, exactly. They can understand part of the process, they can see it in action,
Mm-hmm.
and that creates more emotional, mental connection with the artistry that's going on in front of them. And I say this all the time, video is the next best thing to being in person. I mean, if you can't be in the studio with that artist, the ability that we have to show the world the behind the scenes, the get ready with me's, and all of those aspects through a lens is really a gift if we use it properly. And it's interesting that you mentioned that Tracy made that comment during a scene in a show, because actors are, I feel, a completely different breed
Mm-hmm.
and have abilities that us regular humans don't have. I mean, let's be honest. So there was an interview done with, his name is Andy Cohen from Bravo, the network Bravo, and somebody was interviewing him about, or maybe it was somebody else, but the interview was about him and how he started the Real Housewives franchise. And when Housewives were beginning to be brought on to their shows, he had a clause in contracts that he did not want any actors on the show because the Housewives are supposed to be reality shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the clause, I don't want any actors, was there. And then they eventually let that go. Obviously, there's a lot of actors on there now. But I think the intent behind that was actors have the ability to flip,
Mm-hmm.
morph into different people. And that ability right there is like other level, like spiritual almost. But they have the ability to become someone else. And then that in turn becomes their reality.
Mm-hmm.
So reality to them is even completely different. And, I'm sure there are people out there that are not actors and probably should be just because they have that ability
Is
and
that
bring that
positive or
in.
negative now? I'm
It can
trying.
be both.
Okay.
It can be both.
Wanna,
It's all perspective.
it's right.
But
Perspective is in the ears of the listener. Is that what we're talking about?
the ears of the listener, more so maybe than the eyes of the viewer. Just because, there's so much that goes into the authenticity piece. It's the eye contact, it's the body language, it's the mannerisms. And as much as voice and tone and the inflections and things like that, they all tell a story.
Mm.
You can't really control that story unless you've had really intense training. Or you can't manipulate that story unless you've had intense training. That's what I should say. So that authenticity piece is key right there. That's why video is so important too, and audio. I mean, having the podcast, and that I think is more real than anything, for sure.
So as I'm thinking about that, and hearing what you're saying, like, what are some tools that we could be using, or what are some tools some listeners or those that are watching on YouTube, so thank you, could be using to be a gateway to open that authenticity?
This is the number one piece of advice that I give to people, I feel like almost daily. So everyone has a smartphone. pick up your smartphone and, like you said, turn the camera on you and record yourself for 30 days, every day for 30 days. Just do 30 seconds. You can, I don't care what you do with that video for the first, half the month, maybe 3/4 of the month if we're really pushing it. You can delete the videos. You can keep them in your phone for later, which is a really good idea when you're struggling for content. You need B-roll, just an FYI. Turn the camera on and just speak to the camera for 30 seconds. And as you continue to build that muscle every single day, you become more comfortable and you become more authentic in how you show up. At first, you'll probably, just maybe stare at the camera and go, oh my gosh, I suck at this, or I don't know what to say. I mean, that's fine too. You can do that. And then probably day 10, you'll look at the camera differently. You'll hold yourself differently. You'll speak differently. Your voice holds confidence too. The way that you look in the camera holds confidence, and that increases that authenticity piece. And then maybe by the end of the month, you're actually comfortable with posting and putting it out there on your Instagram stories maybe, and connecting further with people. And they're seeing that authenticity and connecting with you. And that's how you create ultimately those realistic connections.
And I'm so glad you shared that, because you shared that with me just a couple of years ago when I was starting this podcast journey. You're just like, go do this. Because as many of you know, and if you don't know, then go back to episode 1 through 5, and you're going to hear all about the fact that I legitimately started this podcast because of fear of being on video. And not just a fear, but not really liking it or enjoying it.
Sure.
And in full disclosure, I'm not sure that I still like or enjoy it, but I certainly have a different confidence around it. And I don't have the fear has gone. And I think that that's what's different. And maybe that's where, even you have shared sometimes, like just the confidence is different, which makes it easier to get on and to do in my case, I'm using it in a podcast space. I still don't pick up my phone and do what you said and record myself for 30
oh,
or
good.
60
I'm really
seconds.
glad to know that.
I chose a different path for my impact than doing it on my phone. And I still know that's one of those things that I need to do because of that authenticity piece. Because I can sit here in this space and it's comfortable and it's my environment, and I have good equipment, and I can have the confidence that it's going to really be edited. So if there's any rough edges, so to speak, that they might not make it into the episode. And that's not to say that they're perfect in any way, shape, or form, because we don't want them to be that way. However, I'm still not the one that's picking my phone up and speaking into it. However, I did buy a new cool video camera that I'm testing out that is really fun and awesome. And so I'm letting my excitement for a new piece of gear, which as a media company is always fun, be the motivator to be a little more authentic on camera. And so because it's not my smartphone, it's a new piece of gear.
Yeah,
it's a gateway drug, really.
I mean, I fully understand that. As media nerds, techie nerds, what have you, a new piece of gear will light a fire under anyone's ass, if you ask me. That is, whatever your why is for doing the authenticity piece, if it's a new piece of gear, let it be that. That's totally fine. Everybody is going to have a different why behind that authenticity piece. And, the smartphone is, full disclosure, it is now a necessity in today's life. And if you're using it constantly, if you're running your business from it, if you constantly are having conversations that you are not wanting to have on it, it sometimes becomes a trigger. And that can create some stigma around it. And I know myself, I've gotten to the point where I don't even want to look at my phone after a certain point in the day, or night, I should say, because it just disgusts me at a certain time. And I need to get rid of it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to look at it. And that also kind of gets into that fear piece too. And if you don't like what you're using, if you don't even want to look at it, you're not going to do it. So having that new piece of gear as a why is a really good motivator.
It does work.
But I mean, the smartphone, yes, it's convenient, it's easy, we have it, and it's a great way to practice being on video and being authentic. And it's our connection to the outside world. But it doesn't have to be that. So everybody's going to have a different why. There's different ways to do it. You got a webcam on your computer? Does your laptop have a camera? Use that. There are different ways around. No excuses.
Yeah, there's no excuses other than fear.
Exactly.
And we can break through that because fear is just it's a temporary emotion. It's a temporary feel. You know,
Yes.
It's funny that you talk about that. Like, I get disgusted with my phone. I want to put it down at a certain time of night, like those kinds of things. I've actually gone as far as I will only do certain types of work on certain devices. I will only allow myself to do certain work on my laptop and only certain work on my studio computer and only certain work on my phone. And because it makes that mental shift for me to be like, well, I'm not on my phone. And that way, like in the evening, because I know you and I spend a large amount of screen time, just that's the byproduct of the work we do and the things that we do to make our businesses happen. That sometimes in the evening, like I don't want to be on my phone, but I don't think about it as being on my phone. It's more of a like, oh, I'm curious. Or that's when I try to have conversations. And honestly, like I try not to interact with anybody outside of really my inner circle in the evenings.
Yeah.
Because then my phone becomes a communicative device to people I know and I care about and I want to have a conversation with rather than only business. Right. And I think that that's what I hear from you as well is like, it doesn't need to be the only tool only for business. And was originally created not for that.
No. Like everything in this world, we take things and we twist them. I mean, I'm not surprised.
Right. There you go. It's about as authentic as it gets.
I mean, it's, and different things work for different people too. And like I said, it can be a trigger, if something happened, you're texting back and forth with somebody that maybe you're having a disagreement with or something like that. And it just becomes a nuisance or something like that. And I actually did this the other night and we started doing this in our house. So Kenny does a live radio show on Wednesday nights. And because I have better equipment over here at my side of the studio, we determined that it was probably a better idea for him to use it to broadcast, because why would I sit here and not use it to its fullest potential when he could be? So that means that I have to vacate the office or the studio, whatever you want to call it. And I had a meeting, so I used my laptop. And then after the meeting, he was still going. And I sat down on the sofa and I went onto my phone because I wanted to log into something to do for the business. And I found out I couldn't do it from my phone. My laptop was still sitting there. But I told myself, oh, I can't log in from my phone, so I guess I'll just wait till tomorrow. And that was the way I handled that, because I set my own boundary there. Just because I couldn't do it from my phone. I had my laptop. I didn't even attempt to do it there. That was my cutoff. And that's how I know that I'm done. I don't know. Maybe
I think that bears repeating. Like, you need to set those boundaries so that you know when done is and identify that and say, and that's okay.
Yeah. And circling back to the type of content you want to make and put out there, here's a tip. Maybe don't try to push the content out when you're in that done phase.
Whoa.
There is such a thing as burnout, and all of us experience it differently. Some of us experience it daily. Some of us have it weekly, monthly, yearly, what have you. If, for instance, that was my done point, if I would have tried to put content out after that, what kind of content am I really putting out there? Am I even in the right state of mind to understand what I am putting out there? Is it going to be something that I have to go back and delete or retract because I go back and I'm embarrassed by what I've posted because I was in such a tunnel vision, done state of mind? That's something to think about too.
So I wonder if there's a podcast or like a mini series of reels or shorts we could do called When I'm Done. Like,
Ooh,
and you just like that moment you say I'm done for the day, like you hop on and you have 60 seconds of a moment.
that could be scary.
Yeah, but how authentic is that? Right? Because I hear what you're saying. Like it's maybe not I said this earlier this week is like you can't make big decisions with big emotions.
Right.
And sometimes when we're done for the day, done usually means we've had too many big emotions for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And we're probably not in the best capacity to make big decisions and or put content out that we may want to retract later. And you should think about, is that good or not? Because being authentic means showing the real you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However
Absolutely.
that plays out, right? We don't have to put on a face. I think one of the best compliments I've ever gotten in my life was somebody I met in person after only knowing online for an extended period of time. And that person's words were, "You're exactly who you are in the digital space in person."
That's
and they
cool.
said, "And even better." Right. And so to me, that is being as real and as authentic as you can all of the time, regardless of the space you're in. Right. Because wearing different hats can sometimes mean like I'm a chameleon, so I can fit in many places. But that doesn't mean you have to change who you are.
Right.
And I think that that's something that, I'm later in life. So it took me a minute to figure that out. However, once I figured that out, it actually made it easier.
I'm sorry. I just realized you said I'm later in life. I was like, what does that even mean? Did you just call yourself old?
No, I said that I'm later in life.
I mean, that I understand where you're going with that, the experience piece. But please, sorry.
Okay, I feel old and I have some wisdom to share with you all. And that's
authentic.
Takes a minute. And this is me trying to be young. I'm wearing a hoodie and my hat backwards. So there we are.
I don't even know what young is anymore. Honestly, I don't even know that the quote young knows what young is.
I don't think so. And I think 45 is the new 20. So
yeah.
And I mean, I can just tell you, I resonate with that. There you go.
Yeah.
That gives you some perspective of where I'm coming from. I would say that the 90s just had such a huge impact on music, and then alternatively, and in addition to just culture in its entirety. And it really changed the landscape of the music industry, which changed the landscape politically and all, so it was a time where music still had a large influence across the board.
Yeah.
And I think it just looks different now for different reasons.
Yeah. I think you're right. I love hearing the stories behind the music. Who remembers that VH1 series Behind the Music?
Right. When they actually played music videos.
Right. And actual music videos. I love hearing the stories behind the music. And the 90s, I mean, every song, every album, every artist has a story behind what they were writing and doing. And I think, that paved the way for emo, in the 2000s and things like that. And now today, I feel like so much music is so generated that there's less story behind it, or at least we're not hearing as much of the story behind it as we are just the actual music. It's becoming much more of a marketing thing, or just it's music is used in a different way, and it saddens me a little bit sometimes. That's where the authenticity is. is with the independent artists, because they're still telling the stories. They're telling the stories through their music and not doing what a label is telling them to do. And I miss that. And I think that's what's really important about the independent scene, for lack of a better term. But yeah, it's the authenticity, it's the connection, it's real. And, a couple of decades into the future, are we going to have people doing radio shows for the 2020s? Or, maybe we will. I don't know. Maybe I'm old. I'm later in life. But I just don't feel that connection to music anymore. New music, I should say.
I feel like that's a trend coming right now, Nell, and it's going to be #I'm later in life.
I love it. We need shirts. Later in life. We just
started it right now. You heard it here first on the Rhythm of the Road podcast on the Mixed Media series. And you just wait. Pretty soon in the shop, you're going to be able to buy a t-shirt that says, I'm later in life. And here it is, right here, right now. That's as authentic as it gets. We just make stuff up on the fly. And this is why collaboration works. This is why you get synergy when you put good people in the same space, and can just have a conversation. And I think that's what makes what I hope to do here on the Rhythm of the Road podcast, and specifically with this series. Like, we are the example. We are setting an example for you, the listener, you who are watching, to know what it could look like for you to collaborate in a space and to have an opportunity to have just real conversations and see how it plays out in real time. Because we don't script these things. We don't follow an outline. Maybe we should. No.
Nah.
that doesn't
sound like
either
fun.
of us, I don't think. Maybe it does for you. I'm not going to speak for you now. Maybe it would work for you. It's not going to work for me.
I don't know. I have a particular feeling about scripting things, which, there's a time and a place. This is not the time nor the place.
Neither of those. So thank you, Nell, for being an amazing guest, and not even a guest. You're a co-host for this series, the Mixed Media series, 1,000,000%. So please make sure that you hit the links down below and in the show notes. Please leave a review. Please reach out to Nell if you want to hear more about her story and the things that she's doing over at Enticing Media, because they're doing super cool things in the creative space as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all of that, but also thank you for allowing me to be a part of this road that you're on. We're all on it together, right?
And with that, we'll see you on down the road.
Thanks for cruising with me on this episode of Rhythm of the Road. Remember, the journey itself is the destination. Until next time, keep the rhythm flowing, and we'll see you down the road.